Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen had heard every joke in the book, every snicker behind her back, every whispered comment when she walked past the barracks at Fort Braxton. "There goes our kindergarten teacher," they'd say, watching her 5'4" frame navigate the dusty training grounds. "Wonder when she's gonna cry and ask to go home." But Sarah didn't cry. She never cried. Not when Sergeant Murphy accidentally gave her twice the gear weight during training runs. Not when her bunkmates left dead mice in her locker. And certainly not when Colonel Harrison looked her straight in the eye during briefings and said things like, "Chen, maybe you should sit this one out. This mission requires a different kind of soldier." What they didn't know was that Sarah Chen had been fighting her whole life. Growing up in a small farming town outside Bakersfield, she'd learned early that being underestimated was sometimes the best weapon you could have. When the high school bullies cornered her younger brother Tommy behind the gym, they didn't expect the quiet Asian girl to step out of the shadows. They certainly didn't expect her to send 3 of them to the nurse's office with broken noses and bruised egos. "You're too soft for this world, Sarah," her father had said that night, shaking his head as he drove her home from the principal's office. "You need to learn when to walk away." But Sarah had never learned how to walk away. It wasn't in her nature. That's what brought her to the Army in the first place. After 9/11, while her college friends were planning spring break trips and picking majors, Sarah was at the recruitment office. She wanted to serve. She wanted to make a difference. She wanted to prove that soft didn't mean weak. The recruiter, a grizzled veteran named Peterson, had looked her up and down like she was a lost puppy. "You sure about this, sweetheart? The Army ain't no place for delicate flowers." Sarah had signed her name on the dotted line without hesitation. Now, 3 years later, she was part of an elite reconnaissance unit stationed at Fort Braxton. Well, technically she was part of it. In reality, she spent most of her time handling communications and logistics while the real soldiers went out on the dangerous missions. "Chen's our little secretary," Corporal Davis liked to joke during mess hall. "Keeps our paperwork nice and neat while we do the heavy lifting." The others would laugh, but Sarah just kept eating her mashed potatoes and planning her next move on the chessboard in her head. Because that's what this was, a chess game, and she was tired of being treated like a pawn. The turning point came on a Tuesday morning in September. Intelligence had been tracking a high-value target in the mountains outside Riverside County. A foreign operative who'd been coordinating attacks on military installations across the Southwest. The guy was good, real good. He'd already taken out 2 reconnaissance teams and disappeared back into the wilderness like smoke. "This one's a ghost," Lieutenant Torres explained during the briefing, pointing to grainy satellite photos on the projector screen. "Sniper training. Special Forces background. He knows these mountains better than we do, and he's making us look like amateurs." Sarah studied the photos from her seat in the back row. Something about the terrain looked familiar. Those ridgelines, the way the valleys curved around the peaks. She'd seen them before. "Sir," she said, raising her hand, "I know those mountains." The room went quiet. 20 pairs of eyes turned to stare at her. Lieutenant Torres frowned. "What do you mean you know them?" "I grew up about 40 miles from there. My family used to hunt those ridges every fall. I know every trail, every cave, every water source for 30 square miles." Sergeant Murphy let out a snort. "Oh, great, our den mother thinks she's Pocahontas now." The room erupted in laughter. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she pressed on. "The satellite images show he's moving along the eastern ridge system, but that doesn't make sense if he's trying to stay hidden. Those ridges are exposed, visible from the air." She stood up, walking closer to the screen. "But if you drop down into Miller's Canyon, right here there's a whole network of limestone caves. Natural cover, fresh water from an underground spring. It's where I'd go if I wanted to disappear." Lieutenant Torres looked at the photos again, then back at Sarah. "You're saying our target might be using these caves as a base? I'm saying if I were a sniper trying to control access to these mountains, that's exactly where I'd set up shop. You can see for miles in every direction, but you're completely hidden from overhead surveillance." Corporal Davis shook his head. "Come on, LT. You're not seriously considering taking tactical advice from our secretary." "Chen's not qualified for field operations," Colonel Harrison added from the back of the room. "She doesn't have the training. Or the temperament." Sarah turned to face the colonel. "With respect, sir, I've got more time on those mountains than anyone in this room, and I've been requesting advanced tactical training for 2 years. Every request gets denied. Because you're not cut out for combat operations, Chen. You're too... Colonel Harrison paused, searching for the right word. Too soft. This job requires killers, not babysitters. The word hung in the air like a slap. Too soft. There it was again. The label that had followed her since basic training. But then Lieutenant Torres surprised everyone. Actually, Colonel, Chen might be onto something. We've lost 2 teams trying to track this guy using conventional methods. Maybe we need someone who thinks differently. Absolutely not, Colonel Harrison shot back. I'm not sending an untested soldier into the field against a trained killer. It's suicide. Sarah felt something snap inside her chest. 3 years of being overlooked. 3 years of watching less qualified soldiers get promoted while she filed reports and answered phones. 3 years of being called too soft. Give me a chance, she said quietly. The room fell silent again. Give me one chance to prove I belong here. Let me guide a reconnaissance mission to those caves. If I'm wrong, I'll accept a transfer to a desk job. But if I'm right, she let the words hang there. If she was right, everything would change. Colonel Harrison studied her for a long moment. And if you get yourself killed? Sarah met his gaze without flinching. Then I guess you'll finally have proof that I was too soft for war. The colonel's jaw tightened. Around the room, soldiers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. This wasn't how these briefings usually went. Lieutenant Torres cleared his throat. Colonel, with respect, we're running out of options. This operative has made fools of us twice already. Maybe it's time to try a different approach. A different approach, yes, but not with her. Colonel Harrison pointed at Sarah. She's never been in combat, never taken a life. The first time she sees real action, she'll freeze up and get her whole team killed. Then give me a small team, Sarah said. 2 soldiers. Reconnaissance only. We locate the target, confirm his position, and call in air support. No direct engagement, Sergeant Murphy laughed. Right, because nothing ever goes wrong on reconnaissance-only missions. Murphy's got a point, the colonel said. These operations have a way of turning kinetic real fast. And when that happens, we need soldiers who can handle the pressure, not someone who's going to hesitate when it matters most. Sarah felt the familiar frustration building in her chest, the same frustration she'd felt watching her brother get picked on, the same frustration that made her sign up for the army in the first place. How will you know if you never give me the chance to prove it? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Colonel Harrison's face darkened, and Sarah knew she'd crossed a line. You didn't challenge a colonel in front of his men, not if you wanted to keep your stripes, but she was tired of playing it safe, tired of being overlooked, tired of being too soft. Colonel Harrison stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. You want to prove yourself, Chen? Fine, but you'll do it my way. Sarah's heart started racing. This was it. Her chance. You'll take Murphy and Davis. 3-day reconnaissance mission. You find this ghost, you report his position, and you wait for backup. No heroics. No improvisation. By the book or not at all? Sarah nodded quickly. Yes, sir. And Chen? Colonel Harrison's voice was ice cold. When this goes sideways, and it will go sideways, I want you to remember that I gave you exactly what you asked for. As the briefing ended and soldiers filed out of the room, Sarah caught snippets of conversation. This is going to be a disaster. Poor Murphy and Davis, babysitting the rookie. Give it 12 hours before she's crying for extraction. But Sarah wasn't listening to the doubters anymore. She was thinking about limestone caves and ridgelines and a ghost who thought he was invisible. She was thinking about chess games and moving pieces into position. Most of all, she was thinking about proving that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room was the one everyone underestimated, because they were about to find out that too soft was just another word for patient, and Sarah Chen had been patient long enough. The helicopter blades chopped through the pre-dawn darkness as Sarah checked her gear for the 3rd time. Beside her, Corporal Davis was cleaning his rifle with the methodical precision of a man who'd done this 100 times before. Sergeant Murphy sat across from them, studying topographical maps with a scowl that hadn't left his face since they'd boarded. I still can't believe we're doing this, Murphy muttered over the engine noise. 3 years I've been working my way up to lead reconnaissance missions, and now I'm babysitting the company mascot. Davis didn't look up from his weapon. Orders are orders, Murphy. Besides, maybe she'll surprise us. Yeah, she'll surprise us, all right. Probably by getting us all killed. Sarah ignored them, focusing instead on the terrain rushing past below. The mountains looked different from the air. more rugged, more unforgiving than she remembered from her childhood hunting trips. But the landmarks were still there. Eagle's Peak rising like a dark sentinel against the stars, the serpentine curve of Miller's Canyon cutting deep into the eastern slopes. 2 minutes out, the pilot announced through their headsets. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. This was really happening. After 3 years of being sidelined, she was finally getting her shot. The weight of her M4 carbine felt strange across her chest, not because it was heavy, but because she'd never carried it into real danger before. Chen. Murphy's voice crackled through the comm. When we hit the ground, you stay behind me and Davis. I don't care what you think you know about these mountains. In the field, experience trumps local knowledge every time. Copy that, Sergeant. And if shooting starts, you keep your head down and call for extraction. Let the real soldiers handle the fighting. Sarah bit back her response. She'd spent the last week in intensive combat training, working with the best instructors on base to prepare for this mission. Her marksmanship scores were actually higher than Murphy's. Not that anyone seemed to care about that detail. The helicopter began its descent, landing lights illuminating a small clearing about 3 miles from the target area. Too close for comfort, but the dense forest canopy made it impossible to insert any further out. Remember, the pilot said as they prepared to disembark, radio check every 4 hours. If I don't hear from you by 600 tomorrow, I'm coming in hot with backup. They rappelled down into the darkness, boots hitting the forest floor with muffled thuds. The helicopter disappeared into the night, leaving them alone with the sound of wind through pine trees and their own breathing. Murphy immediately took point, consulting his GPS and compass. Target area is northeast, about 3 clicks. We'll move slow, check for signs of recent activity. They started hiking through the thick underbrush, Sarah bringing up the rear. Within the first 100 yards, she noticed Murphy was leading them along a game trail that would take them directly up the exposed western slope of the ridge. Sergeant, she whispered into her radio, that trail leads straight up into the open. If our target has overwatch positions, he'll spot us coming from a mile away. Murphy stopped and turned around. You got a better idea, Princess? Sarah pointed to their left where the forest thickened. There's an old logging road about 200 meters that way. It's overgrown now, but it cuts around the backside of the ridge. Takes longer, but we'll have tree cover the whole way. How do you know there's a logging road? Because my grandfather helped build it in 1967. My family's been hunting these woods for 40 years. Murphy and Davis exchanged glances. Fine, Murphy said finally. But if we get lost following your ghost roads, this mission's over. They changed direction, pushing through dense stands of Douglas fir and mountain oak. The terrain was rough, full of loose rocks and fallen logs, but Sarah moved through it like she was walking through her own backyard. Because in a way she was. There, she said after 20 minutes of hiking, pointing to what looked like just another patch of forest. But when they got closer, they could see the faint depression in the earth where the old road used to run. I'll be damned, Davis muttered. She was right. The abandoned logging road wound up the mountainside like a hidden serpent, completely invisible from the air but still passable on foot. 40-year-old tire ruts guided their steps, and the overhanging canopy blocked them from satellite surveillance. As they climbed higher, Sarah began to notice things that made her skin crawl. Fresh boot prints in the mud near a creek crossing, broken branches at shoulder height like someone had been moving through recently. Most disturbing of all, the complete absence of wildlife. No bird calls, no rustling in the underbrush. The forest was holding its breath. Guys, she whispered, something's not right. Murphy held up his hand for silence, then motioned for them to take cover behind a massive fallen log. They crouched there for 5 minutes, listening to the oppressive quiet. What are you thinking? Davis asked quietly. Sarah studied the terrain ahead of them. The logging road curved around a rocky outcropping before disappearing into a stand of dead trees. Lightning strike probably from the look of the charred trunks. Perfect place for an ambush. He knows we're here, she said. That's impossible, Murphy shot back. We've been moving silent. No radio chatter. No lights. Look around, Sergeant. When's the last time you've been in a forest this quiet? No birds, no squirrels, no insects. Something spooked them, and it wasn't us. Davis raised his binoculars, scanning the dead trees ahead. I don't see anything. You won't, Sarah said. Not until it's too late. This guy's a professional. He's been watching us since we left the helicopter. Murphy's jaw tightened. So what do you suggest, Chen? Turn around and go home? Sarah studied the map, tracing their route with her finger. The caves I mentioned are just over that ridge. If he's using them as a base, he'll have overwatch positions covering all the obvious approaches. But there's another way in. Another logging road? Better, a mine shaft. Both men stared at her. Come again? There's an old copper mine about half a mile south of here. Played out in the 1950s, but the main tunnel runs straight through the mountain. It comes out about 200 yards from the cave system. Murphy shook his head. Absolutely not. We're not crawling through some unstable mine shaft on the word of someone who's never been in combat. It's not unstable, Sarah protested. My brother and I used to explore it when we were kids. The main tunnel is solid granite supported with steel beams. It's perfectly safe. Famous last words, Davis muttered. But even as he said it, another piece of evidence presented itself, a glint of metal in the dead trees ahead, visible for just a split second before disappearing again. Someone was definitely up there watching them through a scope. Contact, Davis whispered, raising his rifle. Movement in the tree line, 2 o'clock. Murphy brought up his own weapon, scanning through his optics. I don't see anything. He's there, Sarah said quietly. And he's got us dead to rights if we try to push up this road. They crouched behind the log for another 10 minutes, occasionally catching glimpses of movement in the dead trees. Their target was playing with them, letting them know he was there without giving them a clear shot. This is exactly what happened to the last 2 teams, Murphy said grimly. He pins them down, waits for them to make a move, then picks them off one by one. Sarah was thinking fast, running through options in her head like chess moves. They could call for extraction, but that would mean admitting failure. They could try to advance up the road, but that was suicide. Or they could try something completely unexpected. Give me 15 minutes, she said. What? I'm going to circle around to the mine entrance. Give me 15 minutes to get into position. Then you 2 lay down covering fire on those trees. Make him think you're trying to advance up the road. Murphy grabbed her arm. Are you insane? You'll be completely on your own in there. No backup, no support. If something goes wrong, then at least you'll know where he is when he lights me up, Sarah said with a grim smile. But I don't think that's going to happen. Chen, this is not what we agreed to. Reconnaissance only, remember? This is reconnaissance, Sergeant. I'm going to get close enough to confirm his position and count his resources. That's what we came here to do. Davis lowered his rifle. She's got a point, Murphy. We're not accomplishing anything sitting here playing peekaboo. Murphy studied Sarah's face for a long moment. You sure about this mine shaft? Sure as I can be about anything in life. And you can find your way through in the dark? Sarah patted the night vision goggles clipped to her helmet. That's what these are for. Another glint of metal from the tree line made the decision for them. Their ghost was getting impatient, starting to move around up there. It was now or never. 15 minutes, Murphy said finally. Then we light up those trees whether you're in position or not. Sarah nodded and slipped away into the forest, moving like her grandfather had taught her during those long-ago hunting trips. Heel to toe, weight on the outside of her boots, never stepping on anything that could snap or crunch. The mine entrance was exactly where she remembered it, hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines and 40 years of overgrowth. The wooden door had rotted away long ago, leaving a dark opening that looked like the mouth of some ancient beast. Sarah pulled on her night vision goggles and stepped into the tunnel. The air inside was cool and stale, heavy with the smell of old rock and rusted metal. Her grandfather's stories came flooding back as she moved deeper into the mountain, tales of miners who'd spent their lives in darkness, following veins of copper through solid granite, men who'd known these tunnels better than their own homes. The main shaft ran straight and true for about 400 yards before branching off into smaller tunnels. Sarah kept to the main route, following the narrow-gauge railroad tracks that had once carried ore cars to the surface. As she walked, she could hear the faint sound of her own breathing amplified by the tunnel walls. Nothing else. No cave-ins, no unstable sections, no surprises. Just solid rock and steel supports, exactly as she'd promised. But as she approached the far end of the tunnel, she began to hear something else. Voices carried on the mountain air through the cave system ahead. Sarah froze, pressing herself against the tunnel wall. She was close, very close, and what she heard next made her blood run cold. American Reconnaissance Team, 3 personnel moving up the western approach. A voice was saying in accented English, I have them pinned down behind the fallen tree, requesting permission to engage. A radio crackled with static, then another voice responded, Negative. Let them advance into the kill zone first. Make sure you get all three. Copy that. Estimated time to contact 5 minutes. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't just one sniper. This was a coordinated operation, and Murphy and Davis were walking straight into a trap. She checked her watch. 2 minutes until they started their covering fire. 2 minutes before her teammates exposed themselves to what sounded like multiple shooters. Sarah had a choice to make. Stick to the plan and try to gather intelligence, or break radio silence and warn her team. But as she crept closer to the tunnel exit, she realized there was a third option, one that nobody would expect from someone too soft for war. Sarah crept to the tunnel exit, staying low in the shadows as voices carried through the mountain air. What she saw through her night vision goggles made her stomach drop. The cave system was bigger than she'd remembered. 3 separate limestone caverns connected by narrow passages, and every single one of them was occupied. She counted at least 6 hostiles moving between positions, all armed with military-grade weapons and communication equipment. This wasn't one rogue sniper. This was a full operational base. Team Alpha, report status, the voice from earlier commanded. Sarah could see him now, a tall man with a tactical vest coordinating from the main cavern. The leader. Alpha in position, overwatch on the western approach, came the response. That was the sniper Murphy and Davis had spotted. Bravo. Bravo has eyes on the southern ridge. No movement. Charlie. Charlie is mobile, moving to flank from the north. Sarah's blood turned to ice. They had Murphy and Davis surrounded. Her teammates thought they were dealing with one shooter, but there were at least 3 gun positions and a mobile team. The moment they broke cover to advance, they'd be cut down in a crossfire. She checked her watch again. 90 seconds until Murphy started the covering fire. 90 seconds before her teammates walked into a massacre. Sarah pulled out her radio, then stopped. If she broke radio silence now, the hostiles would know their position was compromised. They'd scatter, disappear back into the mountains, and strike again somewhere else. The mission would be a failure, and more soldiers would die. But if she didn't warn Murphy and Davis, the radio crackled softly in her ear. Murphy's voice, barely a whisper. Chen, you in position? 30 seconds. Sarah closed her eyes, thinking fast. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory. Sometimes, little one, the best way to win a fight is to change the rules before anyone realizes the game has started. Murphy, abort? She whispered into her radio. I repeat, abort the covering fire. What, why? Because I'm looking at 6 hostiles, not 1. They've got you surrounded. The moment you break cover, you're dead. Silence on the radio. Then Murphy's voice, tight with tension. Are you sure? Positive. I can see their whole operation from here. Main camp in the cave system, overwatch positions on 3 sides, mobile team moving to your north. Jesus Christ. What's your recommendation? Sarah studied the tactical situation, her mind racing through possibilities. The hostiles were spread out across multiple positions, but they were all focused on the western approach where Murphy and Davis were pinned down. They weren't expecting an attack from inside their own perimeter. Give me 10 minutes, she said. Chen, whatever you're thinking, don't. We call for extraction and air support. Let the professionals handle this. By the time air support arrives, they'll be gone. This is our only shot. Negative. Too risky. We stick to the mission parameters. But Sarah was already moving, slipping out of the tunnel and into the maze of boulders surrounding the cave entrance. She'd made her choice. Sometimes being too soft meant caring more about saving lives than following orders. The first hostile was positioned on a rocky ledge about 50 yards from the main cave. Sarah could see him through her night vision, prone behind a sniper rifle, completely focused on the distant tree line where Murphy and Davis were hiding. She moved like a ghost through the rocks, using every hunting skill her grandfather had taught her. Hail Tutu, use the shadows, breathe with the wind, become part of the landscape. The sniper never heard her coming. Sarah's knife found the gap between his helmet and body armor, and he dropped silently to the stone. She took his rifle, a high-end military scope with thermal imaging, and his radio. Alpha, status report. The command voice crackled through the dead man's radio. Sarah keyed the mic, pitching her voice low and adding a slight accent. Alpha in position. No movement on target. Copy that. Maintain overwatch, 1 down. At least 5 to go. Sarah moved to the next position, a machine gun nest carved into the rock face overlooking the northern approach. The gunner was scanning the forest through night vision scopes, watching for Murphy and Davis to make their move. This one was trickier. He had a clear field of fire in all directions, and his position was partially exposed to the main cave. Sarah would have to be fast and silent. She waited for a cloud to pass over the moon, then sprinted across 20 yards of open ground. The gunner started to turn, but Sarah's knife was already moving. Another silent kill, another weapon captured. Bravo, report. The radio crackled. Bravo in position. All quiet. Sarah responded, hoping her voice disguise would hold. Charlie, what's your status on the northern flank? Charlie moving to final position. E to 2 minutes. Sarah checked her watch. She'd been off radio with Murphy for 8 minutes now. He'd be getting nervous, probably radioing for extraction any moment. She needed to move faster. The third position was the hardest yet. A rooftop sniper's nest on top of the main cave, with a clear view of the entire mountain face. Sarah studied the approach, looking for any kind of cover. Nothing. 30 yards of open rock. Between her and the ladder leading up to the position. But sometimes, the best way to be invisible was to be obvious. Sarah keyed the radio again. Command, this is Charlie. I've got movement on the eastern ridge. Looks like a 4th American. What? There should only be 3 personnel. Confirmed 4th target moving east toward the old mine works. Requesting permission to pursue. Negative, Charlie. Maintain position. Alpha and Bravo redirect to eastern overwatch. Sarah watched through her stolen scope as the rooftop sniper shifted his position, swinging his rifle toward the fake contact she'd reported. His back was now to the cave entrance. She moved fast, scaling the ladder in seconds. The sniper was so focused on the eastern ridge that he never saw her coming. Another silent takedown, another position secured. Command, this is Alpha. Sarah radioed, changing positions again. I've lost visual on the 3 original targets. They may have moved. Impossible. They're pinned down behind the log. Negative, sir. The position is empty. They've displaced. Sarah could hear activity in the main cave now, voices raised in concern, equipment being moved. The leader was getting nervous, realizing his perfect trap might be falling apart. All units converge on the main cave. We may have been compromised. Perfect. Sarah smiled grimly as she watched the remaining hostiles abandon their positions and fall back to the central cavern. They were consolidating their forces, exactly what she'd hoped for. She keyed Murphy's frequency. Murphy, Chen, you still there? Jesus, Chen, where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for 10 minutes. Sorry, I was busy redecorating. The northern and eastern overwatch positions are neutralized. The remaining hostiles are consolidating in the main cave. Say again. I took out 3 of them, Murphy. The rest are holed up in the cave waiting for an attack that's not coming. Silence on the radio. Then Davis's voice. Did she just say she took out 3 hostiles? By herself? That's what it sounded like. Murphy replied, his voice tight with disbelief. Sarah was already moving again, working her way closer to the main cave entrance. Through her scope, she could see 4 remaining hostiles setting up defensive positions near the cave mouth. The leader was barking orders, trying to maintain control of a situation that was rapidly spiraling out of his hands. Chen? Murphy's voice crackled through her earpiece. What's your current position? About 50 yards from the cave entrance. I've got eyes on 4 remaining hostiles, the leader and 3 others. Okay, here's what we're going to do. You pull back to a safe distance and call for air support. We'll have helicopters here in 20 minutes. Sarah studied the scene through her scope. The hostiles were nervous now, constantly checking their radios, scanning the darkness for threats they couldn't see. In 20 minutes, they'd realize their operation was blown and scatter into the mountains. Some of them might escape, free to set up somewhere else and kill more American soldiers. Negative, Murphy. They'll be gone in 20 minutes. That's not your call, Chen. You've done enough. Pull back and wait for backup. But Sarah had spotted something that changed everything. Through the cave entrance, she could see crates of equipment and weapons. Military-grade gear, communications equipment, enough firepower to supply a small army. This wasn't just a sniper's nest, it was a supply depot for a larger terrorist operation. And sitting next to one of the crates was a laptop computer displaying what looked like maps and target locations. Murphy, this is bigger than we thought. They've got enough weapons in there to arm 50 people, and intelligence that shows other targets. If we let them escape, Chen, I'm ordering you to fall back. Sarah looked at the cave entrance, then at her rifle, then at the 4 men who'd been planning to murder her teammates in cold blood, men who were part of something larger, something that threatened more than just her unit. Murphy, she said quietly, do you trust me? What kind of question is that? Do you trust me to know what I'm doing? A long pause. Then Murphy's voice resigned. God help me, but yeah. I trust you, Sarah smiled in the darkness. Then give me 5 more minutes. And when I tell you to move, you and Davis come in fast from the western approach. Don't hesitate, don't second guess, just move. Chent, 5 minutes, Murphy. Then this is over. Sarah switched off her radio and settled into a firing position behind a boulder that gave her a clear view of the cave entrance. The 4 remaining hostiles were clustered near their defensive positions, still trying to figure out what had happened to their Overwatch teams. She could take them out from here. 4 shots, 4 kills, mission accomplished. But something made her hesitate. Maybe it was the memory of Colonel Harrison's words about needing soldiers who could handle the pressure. Maybe it was 3 years of being called too soft. Or maybe she wanted them to know that the kindergarten teacher was the one who'd brought down their entire operation. Sarah keyed her radio one last time, but this time she used the enemy frequency. Command, this is... What was your name again? The radio exploded with confused chatter. The leader's voice cut through the noise. Who is this? Identify yourself. This is Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, United States Army. The soldier you were planning to murder tonight. Silence. Then, impossible. You're pinned down behind the log. Check again. Sarah watched through her scope as one of the hostiles ran to the cave entrance and raised binoculars toward the distant tree line. She could see his body language change as he realized the position was empty. Sir, the hostile called back. They're not there. The position is empty. How long? The leader demanded. Unknown, sir. Could have been gone for an hour. Sarah smiled and keyed the radio again. Actually, we never left. We just changed the game while you weren't paying attention. You're bluffing. One soldier could not have what? Taken out your Overwatch teams? Neutralized your defensive positions? Oh, but I did. Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie are all dead. And you're next. The leader was scanning the darkness frantically now, trying to locate her position. You Americans are all the same. Big talk, no action. If you had us in your sights, you would have fired already. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just enjoying watching you sweat. The truth was, Sarah was buying time, letting them make mistakes, reveal their positions, panic into poor decisions. Classic predator behavior. Let the prey exhaust itself with fear before moving in for the kill. You want to know why your operation failed? Sarah continued. It's because you underestimated us. You thought American soldiers were soft, undisciplined, easy targets. You are weak, the leader spat back. Your country sends children to fight wars. You're right about one thing, Sarah said, settling her crosshairs on the leader's chest. They did send a child tonight. A child who grew up in these mountains. A child who knows every rock, every tree, every hiding place for 30 miles. She paused, thinking about her grandfather's hunting lessons, her father's disappointment, Colonel Harrison's dismissive words, a child who's been called too soft for war her entire military career. The leader raised his weapon, scanning the darkness desperately. But you know what I learned tonight? Sarah whispered into the radio, her finger tightening on the trigger. Sometimes too soft just means you're smart enough to win without anyone seeing you coming. The shot echoed across the mountainside like thunder. The leader dropped like a stone, his rifle clattering across the cave floor. The 3 remaining hostiles dove for cover, screaming orders at each other in panicked voices. Contact. Contact, sniper in the rocks. Where is she? I don't know. Johnson, can you see the muzzle flash? Sarah had already moved, slipping from her firing position to a new location 30 yards away. The beauty of fighting at night in familiar terrain. Every shadow was a potential hiding place, every boulder a new firing position. Murphy, Davis, you're cleared hot, she whispered into her radio. Western approach now. On our way, Murphy's voice crackled back. Through her scope, Sarah watched the remaining hostiles trying to organize a defense. But they were panicking, making amateur mistakes. 2 of them had taken cover behind the same rock, clustering together instead of spreading out. The 3rd was scanning the wrong direction entirely, looking east when she was shooting from the north. 3 years of watching real soldiers in action had taught her something important. Experience only mattered if you could think clearly under pressure. And these men had lost the ability to think the moment their perfect plan started falling apart. Sarah's second shot took out the hostile, who was looking the wrong way. Clean headshot through the night vision scope, no suffering. Professional and quick. 2 left. The remaining men were shouting at each other now, completely abandoning tactical discipline. One of them grabbed the radio and started screaming for backup that wasn't coming. "Base, this is Mountain Team. We need immediate extraction. We're under attack by unknown forces." Static answered him. Sarah had already destroyed their main communications array with her 3rd shot, targeting the antenna array mounted on top of the cave. No backup was coming. No extraction helicopter. No rescue. They were alone with the kindergarten teacher they'd planned to murder. Murphy and Davis appeared at the tree line, moving fast and low through the underbrush. Sarah could see them through her scope, advancing with the fluid coordination of experienced soldiers. Whatever doubts they'd had about her abilities, they were following her plan without hesitation now. "Sarah, we're in position." Murphy's voice came through her earpiece. "2 hostiles remaining, hold up behind the rocks at the cave entrance." "Copy that. I'm going to flush them out. When they break cover, take them down." Sarah switched back to the enemy radio frequency. "You boys getting lonely down there. Don't worry, this will all be over soon." "Who are you?" One of the remaining hostiles screamed back. "What do you want?" "I told you already. I'm Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, the soldier you thought was too soft for war." She could see them clearly now through her thermal scope. 2 heat signatures pressed against the cold rock, trying to make themselves as small as possible. Fear had taken over completely. They'd gone from hunters to prey in less than 20 minutes, and they didn't know how to handle the reversal. "You want to know what we want?" Sarah continued, her voice calm and steady. "Justice. For the American soldiers you've already killed. For the ones you were planning to kill tonight. For every target on that list you've got in your computer. You know nothing about our mission. I know enough. Military supply depot. Intelligence gathering. Target acquisition for future attacks. Did I miss anything?" Silence from the radio. Sarah could practically feel their shock radiating across the mountainside. They'd thought their operation was secret, secure, invisible. Instead, they'd been completely penetrated by one soldier they'd dismissed as harmless. "Last chance, gentlemen," Sarah announced. "Surrender now and you'll live to see a courtroom. Keep fighting, and you'll die on this mountain tonight." The response came in the form of muzzle flashes as both hostiles opened fire wildly into the darkness. Bullets sparked off rocks, whined through the air, shredded pine branches. But they were shooting blind, aiming at shadows and echoes. Sarah waited for their magazines to empty, then keyed her radio. "Murphy now." Her teammates moved like clockwork, advancing from 2 directions while the hostiles fumbled with reloads. Davis came in from the left, Murphy from the right, boxing them in against the cave entrance. "Drop your weapons," Murphy shouted. "U.S. Army, drop your weapons now." One of the hostiles tried to bring his rifle up, but Sarah's 4th shot took him center mass before he could aim. The final man threw down his weapon and raised his hands, finally smart enough to realize he was beaten. "Don't shoot! Don't shoot! I surrender." Murphy and Davis moved in fast, zip-tying the prisoner's hands behind his back while Sarah provided overwatch. In less than 5 minutes, the entire hostile position was secured. "Cave clear," Davis reported. 1 prisoner, 4 KIA. "Sarah, you can come down now." Sarah slung her rifle and picked her way down through the rocks to join her teammates. Murphy was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. "I can't believe you just did that," he said quietly. 6 hostiles. By yourself. In the dark? 7, Sarah corrected. "Don't forget the one I took out first." Davis was examining the body of the leader, going through his equipment. "This guy's got serious gear. Military-grade communications, encrypted radios, tactical maps of 3 different states. This wasn't some amateur operation." Sarah moved past them into the cave, studying the intelligence materials scattered around the main cavern. What she saw made her blood run cold. Detailed maps of military installations across the southwest, photographs of key personnel, timetables for coordinated attacks. "Murphy, you need to see this," she called. Her teammates joined her in the cave, their headlamp beams revealing the full scope of the hostile operation. Weapons crates stacked against the walls, communications equipment that looked like it belonged in a command center. And most disturbing of all, a detailed plan for simultaneous attacks on 5 military bases, scheduled for the following week. "Jesus Christ," Murphy whispered, studying the attack plans. They were going to hit Fort Carson, Edwards Air Force Base, Naval Base San Diego. This would have been a massacre. Not anymore. Sarah said grimly. This operation is finished. Davis was photographing everything with his tactical camera, documenting evidence for the intelligence analysts. Sarah, do you realize what you just did? You didn't just stop one sniper. You prevented the biggest terrorist attack on U.S. soil since 9/11. Sarah looked around the cave, thinking about the chain of events that had brought her here. If Colonel Harrison had listened to her request for advanced training, she might have been assigned to a different unit. If Murphy and Davis had followed standard procedure, they would have called for extraction hours ago. If she had obeyed orders and stayed in her assigned role, you know what the funny thing is? She said quietly. Everyone kept telling me I was too soft for war, too gentle, too emotional, not killer material. Murphy was securing the prisoner, but he looked up at her words. And they were right in a way. I am too soft to enjoy killing. I hate everything about this. Sarah gestured at the bodies scattered around the cave entrance. But being soft doesn't mean being weak. It just means you care enough to do whatever it takes to protect the people you love. Her radio crackled with an incoming transmission. Mountain Team, this is Base Command. Report status, Murphy picked up the radio. Base Command, this is Mountain Team. Target location secured. 7 hostiles neutralized, 1 prisoner captured. We've discovered intelligence indicating a major terrorist operation scheduled for next week. Say again, Mountain Team. Sir, Staff Sergeant Chen was right about the cave system. This wasn't just one sniper. This was a major terrorist cell planning coordinated attacks on multiple military installations. We need intelligence analysts and evidence recovery teams up here ASAP. A long pause. Then Colonel Harrison's voice came through the static. Mountain Team, confirm that Staff Sergeant Chen was responsible for neutralizing hostile forces. Murphy looked at Sarah, then keyed the radio. Affirmative, sir. Chen identified the target location, infiltrated the hostile position, and neutralized 7 enemy combatants while providing tactical support for the team. Without her actions, this mission would have been a complete failure. Another pause. When Colonel Harrison spoke again, his voice was different, respectful. Outstanding work, Mountain Team. Extraction helicopters are en route. ETA 20 minutes. As they waited for pickup, Sarah sat on a boulder overlooking the valley where she'd grown up. The same mountains where her grandfather had taught her to hunt. The same trails where she'd learned patience and precision and the importance of understanding your terrain. You know what I still don't understand? Davis said, joining her on the rock. How did you move through their perimeter without being detected? These guys had overwatch positions covering every approach. Sarah smiled, thinking about her grandfather's words from so many years ago. Because I wasn't approaching Davis, I was already home. Murphy emerged from the cave carrying a laptop computer filled with terrorist intelligence. Chen, I owe you an apology, we all do. I've been in the Army for 8 years and I've never seen anything like what you pulled off tonight. Just doing my job, Sergeant. No, you did a lot more than your job. You saved lives. Probably hundreds of lives. Murphy sat down beside her. And you proved something that a lot of people, myself included, needed to learn. What's that? That being underestimated is sometimes the most dangerous thing you can be. The sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the mountains as their extraction arrived. As they prepared to rappel up to the aircraft, Sarah took one last look at the cave system that had changed everything. 3 days later, she was standing in Colonel Harrison's office. The same office where she'd been dismissed as too soft for war just a week earlier. But this time the atmosphere was completely different. Staff Sergeant Chen, Colonel Harrison began, I've received the after-action reports from your mission. I've also received calls from the Pentagon, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security. All of them want to know more about the soldier who single-handedly prevented the largest domestic terrorist attack in 20 years. Sarah stood at attention. Just doing my job, sir. No, Chen, you did something extraordinary. You took initiative in the face of overwhelming odds. You used unconventional tactics to achieve mission success. And you demonstrated exactly the kind of innovative thinking we need in today's military. The colonel walked around his desk, stopping directly in front of her. I was wrong about you, Staff Sergeant. Dead wrong. And I want to personally apologize for the way you've been treated in this unit. Thank you, sir. I'm recommending you for the Silver Star. I'm also recommending you for immediate promotion to Sergeant First Class and transfer to our Special Operations Division. If you're interested. Sarah felt a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. I'm very interested, sir. Good, because we need soldiers like you. Soldiers who can think outside the box. Soldiers who can turn their supposed weaknesses into tactical advantages. Colonel Harrison extended his hand. Welcome to the team, Sergeant Chen. As Sarah walked out of the colonel's office, she passed Corporal Davis in the hallway. He snapped to attention and saluted her, something that would have been unthinkable a week ago. Congratulations. Sergeant Chen, well deserved. Thank you, Davis. You know, I've been thinking about what you said that night. About being underestimated, being dangerous. What about it? Davis grinned. I just think it's funny that a bunch of terrorists spent months planning the perfect trap. And they got taken down by someone they would have dismissed as harmless if they'd ever bothered to look. Sarah laughed, remembering the panicked voices on the radio that night. The confusion and fear when their perfect plan started unraveling. The moment they realized they'd been beaten by the soldier they never saw coming. You know what the best part is? She said. What's that? They called me too soft for war. Turns out I wasn't too soft at all. I was exactly soft enough to get close without them noticing. Soft enough to care more about saving lives than following orders. Soft enough to change the rules of the game before anyone realized it had started. Sarah walked out into the bright California sunshine, thinking about the future. Special operations training, new challenges, new opportunities to prove that strength came in many different forms. Behind her, she could hear soldiers talking in the hallway. Did you hear? Chen took out an entire terrorist cell by herself. No way. Really? 7 hostiles. In the dark. Without backup. They're calling it the most successful solo mission in recent military history. Sarah smiled and kept walking. She had work to do. After 3 years of being called too soft for war, she'd finally proven that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room was the one everyone underestimated, and she was just getting started.